Nah. Wait. That's gross. Yeah. Wait. Physics. Yeah. Woo. It's sweet.
Hello everyone, welcome to the STC Online Income Stream. It's so good to see you. This is actually the last online income stream for 2020. I am a big fan of trying to focus on self-care, and we'll be taking November and December off just to rest and recuperate and all of those different things. But we'll definitely be back in 2021. Starting in January, Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. My name is Melvin Varghese. I'm a licensed psychologist in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I work with busy but overwhelmed entrepreneurs. I'm also the founder of Selling the Couch. And the STC Online Income Stream is just an opportunity for us to talk about growing both our impact as well as income beyond the therapy room. Before we get started with today's live stream, just wanted to apologize for something. For some reason, I am having some sound issues, so the usual mic that I'm using is not getting picked up, but that's the nature of live streaming, right? Sometimes tech stuff comes up and you roll with it. I feel like when I first started this live stream, I would have absolutely freaked out, and but you, like I said, you roll with it. Today's question is, we're going to be talking about podcasting, and more specifically, the 3 tips to conducting better podcast interviews. So if you are a podcaster or are thinking about a podcast, would you let us know in the chat, whether you're watching live or watching later? And if you would like, you can also provide a link to your podcast as well, so that we can support the awesome work that you're doing in the world. I have been podcasting since 2015, and I feel like in many ways I have probably made every mistake, at least most mistakes in the book, when it comes to podcasting, and even more specifically when it comes to conducting podcast interviews. If I'm completely honest, I have had the gamut when it comes to podcast interviews. I've had some that have just been amazing, and I did not want to get off to get off the call and to continue that conversation. And then I've had some that have been okay, and then I've had honestly some that have just been absolutely horrible and like a nightmare scenario, to the point where there's actually been a couple of times where I've had to tell the person, hey, I don't think I can air this, just because of the quality of the interview and all of those different things. I wanted to spend today just sharing some of those lessons that I've learned along the way when it comes to creating better podcast interviews. So I thought I would just start with a story, which is, when I first started my podcast, I think I knew that I wanted to do some solo episodes, but I also wanted to do some interview-based ones as well, especially with the interview-based ones. I really struggled with, how do I provide value to my listeners? How do I share like these interview conversations? How do I go really deep into a topic, but also not overwhelm folks? And my podcast is typically around 25 minutes long. So, how do I go deep, but for a succinct period of time? And but also go deep enough where we don't keep it surface level. These are always things that I think a lot about. The very first tip that I've kind of learned along the way is you want to prep the guest of your before the interview. So you want to prep your podcast guest somewhat before the interview. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to do it like you need to give them a full-blown script and tell them, okay, I'm going to read this question and I want you to respond this way. Nothing like that. It's more you want to set expectations with regard to the podcast interview. So, I usually tell folks, hey, we'll schedule for 1 hour, but the actual conversation will only be about 20 to 25 minutes. We'll use the rest of that time just to get to know one another, to go at a nice and easy pace. And then around the 40-minute mark, I'll actually get off the call so I can record an intro and an outro. So I let folks know the length, the format, all of those different things. That way, I feel like one of the most common things that podcast guests tell me is they've gone on other podcasts and they feel really intimidated. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know what the format of the podcast is or any of those different things, and so they're just unsure of what to do. And so part of my reasoning for prepping that guest is I want to put them at ease and I just want to set expectations. Now, related to this, the second thing I do is I usually share with them a few questions beforehand. I found that if you're going to do a 20 to 25-minute podcast conversation, that leaves you time for asking about 4 to 6 questions. Now, sometimes it can be less, sometimes it can be more, depending on the topic and all of those different things. But what I try to do is I try to give the guest 4 of those questions beforehand. That way they can plan a little bit ahead. They can prep. They can think through how to give a more systematic and a more detailed answer. And what I found is that that blend of letting the guest prepare for some of the questions and then me spontaneously asking somewhere around 3 to 4, or actually maybe 2 to 4 of those questions, that tends to create a nice flow when it comes to the podcast interview. The third thing I always do is I try to hone in for keywords and that the guest is using. I try to hone in when it comes to guest language, and then I always try to follow up. I don't always get it with a follow up. It really depends on a lot of things. For example, if I'm at the tail end of my 20 to 25 minutes and they say something insightful, I might jump in, but other times I just may not get the opportunity. So part of it's just sort of entry points and all of those different things. So for example, let's say that I'm talking with a guest and the guest says, hey, you know, they describe their entrepreneurial journey as an emotional roller coaster. So I might say, you described your business journey as an emotional roller coaster. I'm really honing in on unique language, right? Emotional roller coaster. That's not a common phrase that folks would use. So I'm really curious about what is interesting and why they use that phrase and what that phrase means to them. And so I might say something like, what was a recent event that made it an emotional roller coaster? Or I might say, how do you handle the day to day of this emotional roller coaster? So what I'm trying to do is hone in on keywords, asking what that means to them. And then I try to figure out tangible examples of how that plays out in their world. And so the final tip that I want to share with you is something that I have started to do here in the last, I would say, year and a half or so, which is I try to just block out 1 hour a week, just honing the craft of asking and becoming a better interviewer. I feel like, for many of us, we're helpers and healers, and we might spend a lot of time thinking through, clinical like cases and how we conceptualize things and all of those different things. And I try to do the same thing for podcasting. And one of the things that I usually do is I listen to like a lot of NPR podcasts, specifically like Terry Gross, or I'll listen to like old Larry King interviews. And what I'm really trying to do is, as I'm listening to the interview, I'm like half listening to the interview. What I'm really listening to is the guest, and what I'm trying to listen for is keywords, phrases, and then I try to formulate a question in my mind, and then I listen to what the host asks, and then I try to think about why did they ask that, like what made them ask that kind of thing. And this sounds like a little bit like strange, but I found that a simple exercise like this really helps to sharpen those skills, especially in the moment when you have to ask questions. I mean, the good thing with us is, as helpers and healers, we're naturally pretty good at asking questions. The only difference is when you're doing it in a podcast and it's being recorded, there's that, or you're doing it like recently I had the chance to do it for a conference, right? So there's that performative aspect to it, which adds a little bit of anxiety. Actually, not a little bit, can add quite a bit of anxiety. And so I found that just doing some of this prep beforehand and practicing really does make a difference. So again, the 3 tips are: I prep the guests before the interview. The second thing is I share a few questions that I'm thinking about. The third one is I hone in for keywords and guest language and I follow up. And then the bonus tip is I really spend a lot of time trying to prep and get to be a better interviewer by listening to skilled interviewers. So as I shared at the beginning, this is actually the last live stream of 2020. I am going to be taking the month of November and December off from both the podcast and from the live stream. One of my most important things to me is to really build a business around family and self-care. And I feel like I want to just practice what I preach when it comes to that. So, but we'll definitely be back in 2021 on Mondays. And this is actually the first year that I did a live stream like this. And in fact, I had done a version of it a couple of years ago, and I used basically my phone, and I just did not have a pleasant experience. And at that point, I swore to myself that I would never do live streaming. But especially in the midst of this pandemic, I felt like, and I had been thinking about it for a while, I just wanted to get better and more comfortable in front of the camera. And I love teaching, and I love this opportunity to connect in this way. And I that was kind of the big reason I started the STC Online Income Stream. And I'm just so grateful for each of you guys for tuning in. I never expected the live stream to have the momentum that it's had. But typically, by the end of every week, we have several hundred views, and in fact, one of our live streams went over 1,000 views, which is really cool. The big thing I would be just so grateful for is, as we continue to build out this live stream, I really want to make sure that I'm creating content that's truly helpful for you, that we can have great conversations on. And so I want to hear from you. So if you go to sellingthecouch.com/askmel, ASKMEL, sellingthecouch.com/askmel. It takes literally 2 minutes. It's an opportunity to submit a question for a future live stream, and then make it featured. Have a great rest of your week, and have a great rest of your year, and I will see you in 2021 for the next season of the live stream. Bye.